Hey guys, tonight we're stepping through a doorway most people would hesitate to cross. Imagine it, a tall, narrow house, stooped against the London fog, its windows dim with the grime of another century. The doorbell clangs like a warning, not a welcome. You're about to find out why you, yes, you with your thermostat and your scented candles, wouldn't last 24 hours inside a proper Victorian house. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I love picturing all those little pinpricks of light around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The moment you cross the threshold, the air hits you. Heavy, sour, and faintly metallic. It's a mixture of damp wood, gas fumes, coal dust, and something sweetly unpleasant that might be decay or perfume, or both. The entryway is narrow, wallpapered in a dizzying floral pattern that seems to pulse in the half-light. You instinctively reach for a light switch, but your fingers graze cool plaster. No switch, just the faint hiss of a gas sconce, its flame flickering under a glass dome like a captive firefly. Your eyes adjust, and you notice the umbrella stand is made from an elephant's foot. That's not a joke, it's a genuine trophy from some imperial safari. In Victorian England, even your accessories came with an aftertaste of conquest. The umbrella handles are carved ivory. One is shaped like a snarling lion, which feels like overkill for an item meant to ward off drizzle. Your boots squeak on the encaustic tile floor. Every sound is exaggerated in here, as if the house is eavesdropping. The grandfather clock in the corner coughs out the hour, 6 chimes, and you flinch because each ring reverberates through your chest cavity. There's a smell of cabbage somewhere deep in the house. You're not sure if it's dinner or the wallpaper paste fermenting. A woman in a severe dress glides past the hallway arch, her skirt whispering across the carpet. She doesn't see you, or pretends not to. That's the mistress of the house, moving with the eerie grace of someone who's spent a lifetime gliding instead of walking. She's heading toward the drawing room where the piano sits, unplayed but dusted daily. You catch a faint reflection of yourself in the gilt mirror and realize you look wildly out of place, like a time traveler who lost their return ticket. Your coat, your shoes, even your breathing betray you as a foreigner from the future. You imagine the lady of the house turning, eyebrow arched. What dreadful material is that? Plastic? The Victorians loved to judge. They also loved things, objects, clutter, curiosities from all corners of the empire. It's said that if a flat surface remained empty for more than 3 hours, someone would set a vase on it out of panic. You edge farther inside, past a carved umbrella rack that resembles a medieval torture device. A canary sings from a cage by the window. Its job, besides decoration, is early warning. If the gas lights leak carbon monoxide, the bird will stop singing first. Cozy, right? Gaslighting was cutting-edge technology then. Modern, fashionable, and quietly lethal. Historians still argue whether Victorian pallor came from anemia or slow gas poisoning. You look up at the ceiling. Ornate plaster roses circle the chandeliers like frosting gone wild. The walls seem to breathe as the fire crackles in the parlor. There's warmth, yes, but also smoke, and every breath tastes like burnt coal. You'd think Victorians were immune to it, but they weren't. Chronic coughs were practically a national pastime. You follow the faint light into the sitting room. The wallpaper here is darker, damask in maroon and gold, absorbing the lamplight like velvet shadows. Every inch of furniture is carved free, aired or embroidered. There's a faint ticking from dozens of clocks. It's as though time multiplies itself inside the house. You brush your fingers over a velvet armchair and realize it's slightly damp. Condensation. Without central heating, moisture crept into everything, wood warped, textiles mildewed, and lungs protested. You hear movement upstairs. Floorboards creak like reluctant sighs. A servant? Maybe. Or the ghost of one. The boundary between the living and the dead feels thin here. The Victorians liked it that way. Seances were a fashionable pastime. Queen Victoria herself reportedly tried to contact her late husband through a medium. Whether or not she succeeded is still debated. You notice a portrait hanging slightly askew above the mantel. A young man in military uniform stares back with unsmiling eyes. The plaque reads Arthur 1879, Zululand. His hair is perfect, his gaze unflinching, and his fate almost certainly tragic. Empire demanded heroes, and Victorian houses displayed them like trophies. You feel his eyes follow you as D against drafts but not against germs were perfect incubators. A mainstream historical fact, the germ theory of disease was still controversial in the mid-19th century, many higher than the street outside. You pull the blanket tighter, wool, coarse, and faintly itchy. The Victorian solution to cold wasn't insulation, it was endurance. You sit up, and the bed protests with a loud squeak. Somewhere in the distance, a bell clangs, one of the servant call bells in the kitchen. It rings not for you, but because someone downstairs is already awake, starting the day hours before the household stirs. You hear the muffled thud of coal being shoveled, the rattle of pans, and the dull rhythm of someone sweeping a hearth. That's your alarm clock now. You swing your feet onto the floorboards. They're ice cold, literally numbing. You half expect frostbite by the time you find your boots. The rug offers no relief, it's thin and stiff from years of dust and candle wax. You glance around for a sink, a tap, anything modern. There's only a washstand in the corner with a porcelain basin, a pitcher of water, and a small bar of soap that smells faintly medicinal. The water has frozen overnight into a thin crust. You break the ice with your knuckles and instantly regret it. The shock shoots up your arm like a dare. You splash your face, and the chill hits so hard it makes you gasp. No wonder Victorians looked perpetually startled in photographs. They were always freezing. A mainstream historical fact, central heating existed, but only in prototype form and almost exclusively in public buildings or palaces. Most houses relied on fireplaces and the occasional coal stove. The average Victorian home had more drafts than windows, and the phrase chilled to the bone wasn't poetic, it was a daily reality. You grope for a towel and find one, thin, rough and damp from yesterday. Hygiene wasn't about luxury here, it was about survival. The idea of a hot morning shower would have seemed laughably decadent. You picture yourself stepping into a porcelain tub surrounded by steam and eucalyptus-scented body wash, and the image feels like fantasy. Here, water is a negotiation, not a gift. As you struggle into your clothes, still faintly smoky from the previous day, you hear a soft knock. The door creaks open just enough for a young maid to peek in, her face flushed from the chill. "Morning, miss, sir," she whispers, unsure how to categorize your strange attire. She sets down a small tray, toast so black it could double as charcoal, a pat of butter the size of a coin, and a cup of something that might once have been tea. "Breakfast will be served below stairs soon," she murmurs, eyes down. Then she vanishes like a shadow retreating from light. You get the sense that speaking too loudly would disturb the fragile rhythm of her morning routine. You take a sip of the tea. It's lukewarm and tannic, with the faint tang of soot. The milk has separated into curdled flecks on top. You swallow anyway, because in this century, caffeine is survival fuel. The Victorians loved their tea, imported by empire, sweetened by slave-grown sugar, and steeped in moral superiority. You try another sip and cough. The leaves have escaped the strainer. It's like drinking gravel. The toast cracks between your teeth, leaving a trail of black crumbs. You're chewing history now, literally. Coal dust from the kitchen hearth mingled with flour that's more bran than bread. You wonder how anyone had the energy to invent the Industrial Revolution on this diet. You decide to explore, shuffling into the hallway. The air out here feels marginally warmer, thanks to the fires servants have lit in the main rooms. Smoke curls lazily up the chimney, carrying that distinctive smell of half-burned coal, a scent so pervasive that even flowers in the garden supposedly smelled faintly of smoke. You descend the narrow back staircase, the servants' route, where the wallpaper gives way to bare plaster. The steps creak like disapproving elders. At the bottom, you find yourself in the kitchen, low ceiling, flagstone floor, and a great iron range radiating uneven heat. The cook, a woman built like a small battleship, is elbow deep in dough. She doesn't look up. "Mind your step," she grunts, and you do, because every inch of floor seems occupied, pails, brushes, baskets of coal. The air is thick with steam, grease, and something fried. A cat slinks by, fur singed from getting too close to the stove. In one corner, a scullery maid is pumping water into a basin, each pull of the handle a minor act of heroism. The pump squeals, the water gushes out brownish before clearing, and steam rises as it hits the iron pots. You think about how much water you waste letting it warm up. Here, that phrase doesn't exist. A quirky tidbit: some households believed putting a frog in a kitchen water barrel kept it fresh. The frog apparently ate the impurities, or so people claimed. Historians still argue whether this was superstition, biology, or just Victorian boredom taken too far. Either way, you scan the basin warily, half expecting amphibious company. Breakfast upstairs is still being prepared. The house runs on hierarchy. The family eats last but best. You're offered a sample of the servants' fare, a bowl of thin porridge sprinkled with salt. No sugar, of course, that's for the table above. You take a tentative spoonful. It tastes like regret and wallpaper paste. The cook eyes you suspiciously. "Not used to proper food, are you?" she says. You mutter something about being from the colonies, which seems to satisfy her. You sit on a bench near the range, grateful for the uneven warmth. The fire pops occasionally, spitting tiny embers onto your boots. Time moves differently here, slow, methodical, ruled by bells and chores. Every half hour, another sound echoes from above. Footsteps, doors slamming, faint chatter. The servants move like clockwork, invisible yet indispensable. You think about your morning routine, coffee maker, phone alarm, Spotify playlist, and feel an absurd pang of homesickness for convenience. Eventually, you're ushered toward the breakfast room. The household is stirring now, the genteel chaos of genteel life beginning. The room is formal, even in the morning. Heavy drapes, gleaming silverware, a table set for more people than seem to live here. You take a seat, wrong one of course, and quickly realize your mistake when a thin, mustachioed gentleman clears his throat pointedly. You shift down 2 chairs. Social survival requires agility. The mistress of the house appears, pale and composed, wrapped in mourning silk. Her husband follows, newspaper tucked under one arm. He grumbles something about continental affairs, then pours himself coffee so black it could strip paint. The children drift in, each more polished and restrained than seems healthy. Conversation is minimal, polite, and completely joyless. A plate arrives, eggs with suspiciously grey edges, sausages that glisten like polished leather, and toast that could double as roofing tile. You poke at it with your fork, butter pools on the plate, congealing in the draught. You take a bite, and your stomach makes a formal protest. The father folds his paper. Terrible thing in the Telegraph. A factory explosion in Manchester, 30 dead, mostly women. He says it with the same tone someone might use to comment on the weather. The mistress murmurs, "Dreadful." Then they move on to discussing a cousin's engagement. You sit there, chewing slowly, thinking about the dissonance of it all, the comfort of this house built on discomfort elsewhere. The soot, the servants, the empire, it all hums beneath the silverware clink like a barely audible drone. A maid refills your cup. You thank her. She startles, not used to being addressed. Her eyes flick upward, then down again, quick as a candle flame. You realize kindness here is almost suspicious. When breakfast ends, everyone disperses in silence. The children are sent to lessons, the mistress to correspondence, the master to his study, where he'll pretend to work and actually nap behind a newspaper. You're left sitting at the table, wondering if anyone noticed the way you still grip your fork like a 21st century barbarian. You stand, stretch, and nearly trip over a small footstool designed specifically for resting ladies' slippered feet. The Victorians invented comfort in the most inconvenient ways. You pick it up, set it aside, and catch your reflection in the polished sideboard, paler, smokier, more spectral. The house is already working on you. From the hallway comes a faint chime, luncheon preparations beginning, though breakfast barely ended. Meals are the rhythm of this place, dividing the day like punctuation marks in a sentence you can't quite finish. You take one last look at the remnants of breakfast, the crumbs, the cooling teapot, the butter knife glinting in the grey light, and feel a strange sympathy for them. Even the objects seem tired here. Upstairs, the faint sound of coughing begins again, echoing through the walls. The air smells faintly of soap, ash, and damp linen. You realize that surviving 24 hours in this house isn't about avoiding danger. It's about enduring the endless, civilized discomfort of a world that mistakes misery for virtue. The house feels fully awake now, alive with clatter, footsteps, and the faint hum of routine. You drift toward the dining room again, drawn by the smoky promise of something edible. A servant passes carrying a tray of eggs and another with a silver coffee pot. The smell should be inviting, but in this house, even breakfast seems to carry the perfume of struggle. You settle near the table as the morning light seeps weakly through the lace curtains. It's a grey light, heavy with soot, refracted through a layer of grime so dense it might as well be a second window pane. You sit gingerly, half afraid the chair will collapse under the collective weight of history. A butler, stoic, solemn, maybe part statue, places a dish before you. It's porridge again, this time faintly sweet. You notice small black flecks on its surface, not raisins, soot. The house is constantly shedding tiny black memories from the coal smoke that drifts up the flues and settles over everything like a funeral veil. The Victorians considered it a small price to pay for progress. You're not so sure. You take a cautious bite. It's lukewarm, gritty, and clings to your spoon like wet cement. There's a thin crust of butter on top, barely melted. You glance at the sugar bowl, but there's a moment of hesitation. Does one reach for it uninvited? The mistress of the house is already watching, her eyes sharp as a needle. You decide against it. Across the table, a young governess murmurs her thanks for tea, then drops one lump of sugar into her cup. One, not two. A moral choice as much as a taste preference. The Victorians saw self-denial as elegance. You stir your porridge and think wistfully of drive-through hash browns. The conversation begins slowly, like a creaky machine winding up. The master of the house is reading aloud from the morning paper. Politics, shipping prices, a mention of cholera outbreaks in the East End. He speaks as if these are all distant inconveniences, not mortal threats. The authorities assure us the water's quite safe now, he says, and everyone nods politely. You eye the glass of water beside your plate, suspicious. A mainstream historical fact, during the mid-19th century London's drinking water came straight from the Thames, which doubled as the city's sewer. Cholera swept through the city repeatedly, killing tens of thousands before Dr. John Snow's research traced it to contaminated water. Historians still argue whether his work or the eventual installation of the Great Sewer System truly ended the epidemics, but either way, you're suddenly less thirsty. Your hostess dabs her lips delicately with a napkin. I do wish people would be more hygienic, she says, as if the problem is one of manners, not infrastructure. You smile faintly, swallowing another spoonful of misery. Flavored porridge. When breakfast concludes, you're invited, or perhaps expected, to take a brief stroll through the garden. You step outside, and the cold morning air hits your face like a slap. The sky is the color of tin, and the street beyond the iron fence is already busy with carriages. The air smells of coal, manure, and wet wool. You pull your borrowed shawl tighter around your shoulders. The garden itself is prim but lifeless. Boxwood hedges, bare rose canes, a few frostbitten pansies clinging to survival. You can hear distant bells, factory whistles, and the faint rhythmic thud of a bootmaker's hammer. The city never really sleeps, it just exhales smoke at different hours. As you turn back toward the house, a movement catches your eye near the servants' entrance. A young boy, perhaps 12, unloading coal from a delivery cart. His hands are blackened, his nose running from the cold. You realize he's been working since before dawn. The driver flicks the reins, and the horse moves on, hooves clattering against the cobbles. You glance up at the windows, warm, curtained, glowing with the yellow haze of gaslight, and think about the distance between upstairs and down. It's only a few feet vertically, but might as well be a different planet. When you re-enter the house, the air feels heavier, like it's inhaled your brief taste of freedom. You make your way toward the scullery again, curious. The servants' breakfast is still in progress, if you can call it that. Thick bread crusts dipped in dripping, tea brewed to the color of despair, and conversation hushed. You sit on the edge of a bench, unnoticed for a moment. One of the maids, young, red-cheeked and perpetually harried, offers you a scrap of bread. You'll get in trouble for idling, she warns gently. You thank her anyway. The bread tastes faintly of smoke and salt, but it's warm, and right now that's enough. Another servant, a footman with shoulders like a doorway, laughs under his breath. Best eat quick, he says. Master'll be calling for his carriage soon, and that means the boots need blacking again. His tone is cheerful, but his eyes aren't. You realize that every cheerful tone in this house covers exhaustion. A quirky tidbit, Victorian servants often polished silverware with a paste made from whiting powder, vinegar, and spit. It worked surprisingly well, but prolonged exposure could cause skin burns and lung irritation. Some households even had competitions for the brightest spoon. You're starting to understand why no one in those portraits looks well rested. The mistress's bell rings upstairs, a delicate chime that might as well be a commandment. The staff scatters instantly, their chairs scraping the floor in a rush of obedience. You're left alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the echo of labor. The house hums, satisfied, fed by their effort like a living organism consuming time. You wander back to the dining room, passing a mirror that distorts your reflection. You look tired, older somehow, your face smudged faintly with soot. Maybe it's the lighting. Maybe it's the century catching up with you. A clock chimes 10. In Victorian households, this marks the transition from morning to the respectable part of the day. Parlours are opened, newspapers folded, and the world begins its polite masquerade. You feel compelled to join in, even though you have no idea what joining in means here. You take a seat in a side parlour. The room smells faintly of lavender polish and anxiety. A fire burns low, painting everything in a restless amber glow. On the mantelpiece sit several porcelain figurines, shepherds, angels, a tiny dog frozen mid-bark. Victorians adored such sentimental clutter. Every surface told a story no one wanted to hear aloud. You pick up a magazine from the side table, The Lady's Companion, dated 1887. The pages are brittle, the ink slightly smudged. The articles promise household advice, moral uplift, and stories suitable for the drawing room. Oh, the column offers recipes for economical puddings. Another warns of the dangers of excessive laughter in women. You read that twice, to be sure. Historians still argue whether such advice columns shaped social behavior or merely reflected it, but either way, you find yourself stifling a laugh, just in case. The fire sputters. A log collapses in on itself, showering the hearth with sparks. You imagine the smell clinging to every curtain and cushion. No wonder the Victorians loved potpourri, dry rose petals and herbs stuffed into sachets to battle the unending scent of smoke and humanity. You spot one hanging from the mantel, a little embroidered pouch, faded and sad. You squeeze it gently. It smells like the memory of flowers. From the hallway, the butler's voice drifts in. "Carriage is ready, sir." The master grunts his acknowledgement. Doors open. Coats rustle. The sound of boots on marble follows. Then the front door slams, and a sudden silence descends. A pause, deep and absolute. The house exhales again. You lean back in the chair and close your eyes for a moment. The fire crackles softly. You could almost doze off if not for the faint feeling that something's watching you. Not someone, something. The sensation is subtle, like static against your skin. You open your eyes, and the porcelain dog on the mantel seems to have shifted slightly. You blink. It hasn't. But the light has, and the illusion remains. You decide to move, if only to break the spell. Back in the corridor, you catch another smell. Something savory, maybe soup. The kitchen, you realize, is already preparing for lunch. Time here isn't measured in hours but in meals and chores. You feel dizzy thinking about the endless cycle. Cook, clean, serve, repeat. You pass by the nursery door, faintly ajar. Inside, you glimpse toys scattered on the floor. Wooden soldiers, a doll with one glass eye, a rocking horse with a chipped mane. The air smells faintly of talc and sour milk. A nanny hums an old tune about obedience and grace. You back away quietly. There's something unnerving about a place where even the toys look disciplined. By the time you return to your room, it's nearing noon. Your hands smell faintly of smoke, your clothes of damp wool. You look around the room and notice the frost on the window has melted, leaving trails of condensation like tear marks. You rub them away and glimpse the street below, vendors calling out, carriages jostling, the fog beginning to thicken again. The day outside looks busy, unrelenting. The day inside feels slower but heavier, like walking through syrup. You realize you're hungry again, though hungry might be too optimistic a word. It's more that your stomach hasn't given up yet. In another hour you'll face lunch, which promises to be both elaborate and exhausting. But for now you sit on the edge of the bed, wrapping the shawl tighter, and think, it's only been half a morning. You've got 21 and a half hours to go. You wake from a shallow nap to the sound of rustling fabric, like sails unfurling in a windless room. Someone's in the adjoining dressing chamber, already setting out garments on a stand. The day is apparently about to begin in earnest, and the house expects you to dress the part. You stretch, still stiff from the chill, and instantly regret it. The air outside your blanket feels like it's biting your skin. You shuffle toward the open doorway. A maid curtsies quickly, eyes down. "Your things, miss..." "Sir," she hesitates again, uncertain what century your pronouns belong to. She motions to the arrangement, layer upon layer of clothing, each one a small architectural project. The sight alone makes you tired. There's a shirt, linen stiff as parchment. Then drawers which look more like bloomers, stockings, garters, a corset, or if you're playing the masculine role today, a waistcoat stiffened with whalebone that looks only marginally less cruel. Over these, petticoats, a bodice, and finally, a gown or frock coat. Heavy enough to count as exercise equipment. You glance at her, half joking. "How long does all this take?" She doesn't smile. "An hour if you don't fuss." You are about to fuss. Victorian dressing isn't simply about covering the body, it's about building an identity out of fabric and endurance. Every button, lace and hook is a declaration of class, morality and suffering tolerance. Fashion wasn't comfortable, it was moral architecture. You start with the undergarments. The linen clings damply to your skin from the cold air. Then comes the corset. It looks deceptively elegant, pale ivory fabric stitched with delicate floral patterns, but it's essentially an armored exoskeleton. The maid instructs you to hold the bedpost. Breathe in, she says. You obey, though it feels like inhaling a brick. The laces tighten and suddenly your ribs feel like harp strings. The pressure is astonishing. You can't quite bend, sitting seems theoretical. Your voice comes out an octave higher. The maid adjusts it again, expression neutral, as if this daily ritual of compression is completely normal. Proper posture, she says, tugging one last time. You see stars for a moment, a mainstream historical fact. During the mid-19th century, tight lacing was considered a marker of refinement. The ideal waist for women was around 18 inches, smaller than most people's necks. Some corsets even featured metal busks that could double as self-defense weapons in a pinch. Historians still argue whether women truly laced themselves that tightly, or if it was more myth than reality, but either way, breathing was an optional hobby. For men, fashion wasn't much kinder. Stiff collars, scraped chins, raw, starched shirts could cut circulation, and those tall silk hats were basically portable ovens. You try on a cravat and feel immediately strangled, which, ironically, was the point. The maid moves efficiently, layering you in fabric. Petticoat, overskirt, bodice. Each step makes you heavier and strangely upright, as though gravity now negotiates terms. How does anyone walk in this, you ask? She shrugs. We learn. By the time she finishes, you look and feel like you've been gift-wrapped by a well-meaning sadist. The mirror confirms it. A figure from another world stares back at you, pale and constricted, posture impeccable out of sheer necessity. Your arms barely move. Breathing is strategic, a fringe tidbit. Some Victorian women fainted so frequently from tight corsetry that furniture makers designed special fainting couches for quick recoveries. You eye the chaise longue nearby and make a mental note of where it is, just in case. You take your first few steps, wobbling slightly. The floor creaks under your boots, which are narrow, high-heeled and uncooperative. The hallway feels longer now that your stride is restricted to dainty shuffles. You can almost hear the walls whispering approval. You pause by a window and see your reflection again, ghostly in the morning fog. The figure you've become fits this century disturbingly well, composed, ornamental, and probably moments from passing out. You touch the glass, it's cold enough to mist beneath your fingers. Downstairs, the parlour calls. The mistress of the house is expecting you for morning calls, or perhaps embroidery, a social ritual disguised as leisure. You descend carefully, gripping the banister with one gloved hand. The gloves are another ordeal, fine kid leather that squeaks faintly when you flex your fingers. They fit like gilt. The drawing room smells of starch and lavender polish. Sunlight filters through lace curtains, catching on dust motes like glitter. 3 women sit at a small table, engaged in embroidery and conversation. Their dresses are monuments, layers of silk and crinoline that could double as small tents. You sit gingerly, trying not to tear anything or collapse. One woman glances at you and smiles faintly. A new style, is it? Rather progressive. You look down, your hem has caught awkwardly, showing an inch too much ankle. Scandal. You adjust quickly. She smirks, satisfied. The conversation drifts toward fashion plates, Paris trends, and who dared to wear lilac before Lent. The words blur into a soft drone. You focus instead on the physical sensation of being encased in fabric. Your spine hums with tension, your ribs ache faintly. Even your earlobes feel overdressed, thanks to the weight of paste earrings. Someone passes you a cup of tea. You try to sip, but the corset prevents full lung expansion. The tea sloshes dangerously. Careful, the hostess warns. You'll stain your bodice. You lower the cup, cheeks flushed. You can't tell if it's embarrassment or oxygen deprivation. The lady across from you sighs dramatically. I do miss the days when fashion was simple, she says, though she's wearing a bustle so large it has its own gravitational field. You nod politely. The bustle, as it happens, is one of those fascinatingly absurd Victorian inventions, essentially a small cage strapped to the rear to exaggerate the body's curve. It was meant to signal fertility, elegance, and the moral superiority of suffering for beauty. You shift slightly, imagining what it would feel like to wear one, and realize that sitting in modern skinny jeans isn't nearly as tragic as you once thought. A clock ticks softly. The conversation shifts to morning attire, a topic of genuine passion here. Black silk, crepe, jet beads. The Victorians had an entire fashion sub-industry for grief, and mourning periods were regulated like prison sentences. 1 year for a husband, 6 months for a parent, 3 for a child, someone recites, as if quoting scripture. You find yourself wondering if anyone ever mourned simply because they were tired. The parlor door opens, and a young man enters, dapper, expression carefully indifferent. He bows, murmurs polite greetings, and takes a seat. His suit gleams faintly with pomade and overconfidence. The women straighten instinctively, each angling for visibility without appearing eager. You're reminded that in this world, social life is a performance art conducted under corseted pressure. The gentleman clears his throat. Have you seen the latest from Paris? They say the new skirts flare less, quite scandalous. A ripple of outrage passes through the room. Scandalous is the highest form of interest here. The women exchange looks that could slice fabric. You sip your tea again, mostly for cover. Historians still argue whether Victorian modesty was genuine moral conviction or elaborate theatre. Either way, the spectacle is impressive. An entire society balancing on the edge of repression and self-display. You begin to suspect that the true corset was psychological. After what feels like hours, you're dismissed. Standing is a struggle. Your legs have gone numb. The maid reappears silently at your elbow, guiding you out. Once in the hallway, you exhale, if that's what you can call it, and lean against the wall for balance. She looks sympathetic. You'll get used to it, she says softly. You whisper back, how long does that take? She considers. Some never do. You make your way upstairs, again, step by cautious step. The corset squeaks faintly with each movement, an audible reminder of your confinement. By the time you reach your room, your head is light, your pulse strange. You tug at the laces, but they resist like stubborn history. Finally, the maid helps. The release comes with an almost indecent gasp, lungs expanding, ribs creaking back to life. You slump onto the bed, dizzy with the sheer novelty of breathing. She unhooks the final clasps and loosens the stays. The relief is so intense it borders on euphoric. You lie there for a moment, feeling your body remember itself. The corset rests beside you, limp now, harmless. It looks almost beautiful, like a seashell, intricate and hollow, but you know what it cost. A quirky tidbit. Some doctors in the 1890s claimed that tight lacing displaced women's internal organs and caused hysteria, fainting, even melancholy. Others argued that these ailments were exaggerated nonsense designed to control women's behavior. The debate still lingers in academic circles, a reminder that even breathing can be political. You sit up slowly, muscles tender, and glance toward the window. Outside, the sky is brightening. But the light has that peculiar Victorian quality, grey around the edges, as though filtered through smoke and nostalgia. A carriage rattles past, the driver hunched against the cold. Somewhere, a church bell tolls noon. You glance again at the discarded garments, realizing how much effort went into the illusion of ease. Every stitch, every lace, every polished shoe hides exhaustion. You think about modern sweatpants with a sudden, passionate gratitude. You pull a shawl around your shoulders and sink into the fainting couch. It's more comfortable than expected, though that might just be relative. You close your eyes, listening to the soft murmur of the house, the faint ringing of distant bells, the whisper of skirts in the hallway, the tick of clocks marking time with polite insistence. Somewhere downstairs, laughter bursts briefly before being shushed. The sound lingers, fragile and human amid the stiffness. You smile faintly, imagining that someone, somewhere in this century, also dreamed of loosening their corset and just existing without pretense. The thought is comforting, almost modern. You stretch, savoring the miracle of breath. Then, as the faint afternoon light drifts across your face, you realize you've survived another hour. The air in the hallway grows thicker as you wander deeper into the Victorian house. You think maybe you've adjusted to the smells, coal dust, damp plaster, old perfume. But no, it's just that each new room brings its own ecosystem of odors. The Victorians, it turns out, lived inside a jungle of their own making, and you've just stepped into the undergrowth. The parlor awaits. You push open the door, and the hinges moan like they resent being disturbed. Instantly your eyes are swallowed by the decor, layer upon layer of visual noise. Every inch of wall, mantel, and shelf is occupied by something. paintings, doilies, family photographs, framed samplers, figurines, plants, taxidermy, books that may or may not have been read, and a fern large enough to demand voting rights. You pause, blinking. So this, you whisper, is what minimalism tried to kill. The room smells faintly of beeswax and wet velvet. A clock ticks somewhere, muffled by curtains heavy enough to block out the next century. You move carefully, afraid to touch anything. The furniture looks upholstered in moral expectations as much as horsehair. You start with the mantel. There's a stuffed bird perched among porcelain dogs and brass candlesticks. Its glass eyes follow you with resigned disapproval. Victorians loved taxidermy. Part art, part science, part existential denial. It let them control the chaos of nature by gluing it to a base and giving it a jaunty hat. A mainstream historical fact, taxidermy reached peak popularity in the mid-19th century, especially after Queen Victoria herself displayed stuffed animals in royal collections. Preserving dead wildlife became a fashionable hobby, and some enthusiasts even staged anthropomorphic tableaux, frogs playing violins, kittens taking tea, that sort of thing. You glance around and, yes, there's a diorama on a side table, 2 squirrels engaged in a boxing match, their tiny gloves sewn on with morbid precision. You look away quickly. The couch sighs as you sit, dust puffing out like powdered judgment. The horsehair stuffing crunches faintly under your weight, which feels less like comfort and more like penance. The Victorians believed that plush indulgence encouraged sin, so even their cushions seemed designed to discourage slouching. The wallpaper behind you, once cream, has darkened to a jaundiced yellow. Scenic green's quieter cousin. You run a finger along it and immediately regret it. That metallic tang on your fingertip might be more than just dust. Arsenic pigments were wildly popular in Victorian interiors, prized for their vivid color and toxic side effects. The saying "beautiful but deadly" could have been a marketing slogan. Historians still argue whether people truly died from arsenic wallpaper, or if it's a case of Victorian myth-making gone melodramatic. Either way, you're not licking the walls to find out. A portrait gazes down from above the fireplace, some ancestor with magnificent sideburns, and a gaze that suggests both empire and constipation. The Victorians adored portraits, the larger and more humorless the better. They were moral mirrors, reminders to behave even in private. You try smiling at the painting, but his eyes disapprove instantly. You glance at the bookshelf next. It's packed with leather-bound volumes, titles gilded in earnestness, The Household Companion, Moral Tales for Youth, How to Keep a Husband Through Obedience and Pudding. The spines gleam faintly in the filtered light, and you notice one crooked on the end, its title rubbed away by use. You pull it free and sneeze at the resulting cloud. The smell is half attic, half nostalgia. It's a family Bible, the kind big enough to stun an ox. Between its pages are pressed flowers, a few brittle locks of hair, and, oddly, a theatre ticket. The Victorians weren't just moralists, they were sentimental hoarders of the highest order. Every object, every keepsake was a capsule of memory. The house is practically alive with them. You wander toward a cabinet filled with curiosities, seashells, fossils, coral, something that might be a human tooth. A small label reads "Collected, Margate, 1862. Back then, seaside holidays were less about relaxation and more about documenting one's conquest of leisure. You imagine a mustachioed gentleman proudly labeling rocks while trying not to faint from his own wool suit, a fringe tidbit. The parlor fern craze of the 1860s was so intense that people formed entire societies devoted to fern collecting. There were fern albums, fern-embroidered pillows, even fern-themed ceramics. The trend was called pteridomania, which literally means fern madness. You look at the monstrous specimen by the window and suspect it might be plotting your downfall. You brush against a table, and a glass dome wobbles dangerously. Inside, a dried bouquet tied with lace ribbon. Morning flowers, maybe. The Victorians preserved bouquets from funerals as mementos, another layer in their grand museum of life and death. You right the dome and exhale slowly. The door creaks open behind you. A different maid pokes her head in. "Would you care for company, sir? Miss?" she asks, uncertain again. You nod automatically, just relieved for human presence. She steps inside and immediately adjusts a doily that was apparently 2 millimeters out of place. "Everything has a spot," she says, as though reciting scripture. You glance around. "Seems like everything has 3. She doesn't smile. Humor, like ankles, is best kept covered. She straightens another tablecloth corner, then gestures at a peculiar contraption near the hearth, a metal box with ornate filigree. "That's the foot warmer," she explains. "Charcoal inside." How sweet home really was when domestic life came with so many invisible rules. There's a faint sense that everything here exists to display propriety, not comfort. Even the air feels corseted. Then you notice a sound, soft, rhythmic. The maid has begun dusting the shelves, humming under her breath. It's a melancholy tune, but there's something soothing about it. You listen as she works, moving like someone who knows every creak of this room. After a few minutes, she glances at you. "It's quieter now than it used to be," she says. "Used to be full of people, afternoon callers, laughter, even piano." "What happened?" you ask. She shrugs. "People stopped visiting, fashion moved on, now it's just dust and memories." You look around again, and for the first time the clutter seems less suffocating, more like fossilized warmth. Every frilled edge, every ridiculous vase was once someone's pride. You can almost hear echoes of past conversations, gossip, laughter, the tinkling of teaspoons in saucers. Still, the moral anxiety lingers. You imagine someone standing in this room, spine straight, smile fixed, terrified of being improper. You think of the portraits, watching silently from their gilded frames. The pressure to seem respectable must have been its own kind of haunting. Historians still argue whether Victorian domesticity was genuinely comforting or just a decorative cage for social control. You lean toward the cage theory, especially after realizing you're afraid to sneeze too loudly. A soft thud startles you, the clock on the mantel striking 4. Tea time again, or maybe judgment hour, the line's thin here. The maid jumps slightly and murmurs, "Pardon," then smooths her apron. You stand, stretching. Your knees protest, your back cracks like an old floorboard. The fern rustles faintly as if approving. You thank the maid and move toward the door, but pause at the threshold for one last look. The parlor glows faintly in the dimming light. The objects seem to watch you go, not maliciously, just curiously, as if wondering what kind of person doesn't fill every inch of wall space. You give them a small nod, an acknowledgement across time. Outside, the corridor feels bare by comparison. The wallpaper here is simple, the air clearer. You exhale deeply, realizing you've been holding your breath for most of the visit. You move toward the next room, but the smell of beeswax and velvet clings to you like a souvenir. You can't shake the sense that you've just walked through someone's mind. A meticulous, anxious, beautifully over-decorated mind. Halfway up the staircase, a thought strikes you. Maybe this house isn't decaying. Maybe it's just waiting for company that never arrives. You glance back once more. The parlor door is half open, and for a moment, you swear you see movement inside. A flicker of lace, a shimmer of dust dancing like someone's ghost still hosting afternoon tea. You smile faintly. "Nice room," you whisper, though it's not clear to whom. Then you turn away, careful on the creaking steps, the sound of that ticking clock fading behind you like a heartbeat. You've seen the polished world upstairs, the rooms perfumed with lavender oil, the parlor stuffed with moral upholstery, but the real heartbeat of the Victorian house beats somewhere beneath your feet. You find the narrow service staircase tucked behind a drapery, a kind of architectural apology. It spirals down sharply, lit by a single candle stub that looks like it's given up on its own career. The air thickens as you descend, warm and faintly sour. Coal smoke, wet stone, old cabbage and effort. Your hand trails the wall as you go. The wallpaper gives way to plain plaster, then to raw brick. The sounds change too. Faint clatter, low voices, the scrape of metal on stone. The rhythm is steady, mechanical, human. You've entered the house's hidden circulatory system. At the bottom, you step into a corridor so narrow you can feel both walls at once if you spree. To your arms. Lamps hiss faintly, their light trembling across worn tiles. Shadows move constantly here, bodies crossing, heads bowed. Everyone too busy to make eye contact. You're the only one standing still. A small woman in a cap nearly collides with you, balancing a tray stacked with silverware. She mumbles something polite that might also be a curse, then disappears into the gloom. Another figure rushes past carrying logs, leaving a trail of soot flakes. Everyone moves with practiced choreography. No words, just a quiet, desperate efficiency. You realize, with a kind of creeping awe, that the house runs on these people. Upstairs, candles flicker and teacups clink. But down here is the grindstone that keeps that illusion of gentility spinning. You duck through a low doorway and find the scullery. Steam clouds everything, turning the room into a glowing fog of exertion. Two maids stand at enormous sinks, their hands raw and red from lye soap and boiling water. One looks up briefly, startled to see a stranger not holding a brush. "You lost?" she asks. "Probably," you admit. She grins faintly, a flash of white teeth through the haze. "Then you found the right place. Everyone's lost down here." A pot clangs in the background, punctuating her joke. She plunges her hands back into the water and hums a tune you can't quite place, something that sounds half hymn, half complaint. A mainstream historical fact. In the 1880s, a large household could employ as many as 20 servants, cooks, scullery maids, footmen, housemaids, grooms, and more, each with rigidly defined ranks. The hierarchy downstairs mirrored the one above, except instead of inheritance and titles, it was measured in blisters and who got to eat sitting down. You edge farther into the scullery. Everything here glistens with effort, copper pots polished to blind a god, knives lined up like a military parade, scrub brushes worn to stubs. A single window near the ceiling lets in a wedge of grey light, but it's mostly the fire that illuminates faces, orange and flickering, softening, nothing. The cook stands at the centre, a formidable woman with arms like rolling pins. She's barking instructions at a kitchen maid. "Mind the pudding, and if you burn the mutton, again, I'll feed it to the chimney sweep." The maid nods frantically, hair coming loose. You stay out of the way, pressed against a shelf lined with jars, preserves, pickles, something suspiciously gelatinous labelled "dripping fat 1879. The smell is both delicious and terrifying. A small boy darts past carrying a coal bucket, leaving a trail of black smudges. He looks about 10, maybe younger. You catch his sleeve as he passes. "How long have you been down here?" you ask. He blinks. "Since before breakfast." "And when do you finish?" He shrugs. "After the plates stop." A fringe tidbit: chimney sweeps in the early Victorian era were often children as young as 6. Their small bodies used to climb flues. Though laws were passed to regulate it, enforcement was laughably inconsistent. Many servants in large houses began work as children too, apprenticed into exhaustion before their first real growth spurt. The cook notices your wandering gaze. "Don't just stand there gawping," she says. "If you've time to breathe, you've time to polish." She thrusts a rag at you. It smells of vinegar and resignation. You polish. The copper pan gleams slowly to life, reflecting your face in distorted warmth. There's something grounding about the motion, circular and endless. Around you, everyone moves like part of a well-rehearsed symphony, each gesture timed to the beat of necessity. A maid mutters something about the mistress's dinner party tonight. 20 guests, 5 courses, and no appreciation. The cook snorts. "They never notice unless it's burnt." "Then we'll burn it on purpose," the maid says, deadpan. For a moment, laughter ripples through the room. You can tell this is how they survive it. Shared humour in small d. Osies, spoonfuls of rebellion to sweeten the endless grind. Historians still argue whether Victorian servants truly accepted their place, or if they quietly resented every bell that summoned them. Letters, diaries, and fragments suggest both. Loyalty mixed with exhaustion, affection mixed with bitterness. The truth probably sits somewhere between gratitude and a longing to run away barefoot into the 20th century. You follow the maid carrying a tray through another door, into the servants' hall. It's a long, low room with benches and a single table running its length. The smell here is equal parts bread crust and damp wool. A few off-duty servants sit eating quickly, conversation low but lively. One looks up at you, grinning. "You from upstairs?" You nod. He gestures with his fork. "Then sit, if you don't mind plain fare and plainer talk." You do. The bread is coarse but hearty, the butter slightly sour. It tastes like relief. They tell you stories between bites, of masters who forget faces, of maids dismissed for sneezing during prayers, of the one footman who claimed he'd seen the mistress sneaking brandy at noon. "Careful," someone says with mock gravity. "Walls have ears." "They've also got cracks," another adds, "and we see through all of them." The laughter that follows is soft but real. Down here, truth is currency. A bell rings sharply from the corridor. 3 quick chimes. Everyone freezes. "Drawing room summons," the cook says. "Best hurry or she'll send for you again," louder. The footman stands, smoothing his hair, transforming from human to decor in an instant. You watch the change, spine straightening, face neutral, all warmth erased. He leaves, already invisible in purpose. You follow more slowly, climbing back up the servant's stair behind him. The air grows cooler as you rise, the light fainter. It's astonishing how sharp the border feels, the moment you step from labour into luxury, from smell to scent. The same house, but two worlds never meant to mix. You linger in the doorway at the top. A hallway stretches before you, bright and carpeted, quiet as a prayer. From here, you can almost forget the clatter below. The illusion of order, of calm, is perfect, except that now you know it's built on sweat. You turn back once more. Down the stairwell you can still hear faint laughter, someone humming, the clang of a pot lid. It sounds like heartbeat percussion. You imagine what it must feel like to live your entire life in those lower corridors, waking, before dawn, moving silently through the house while its owners dream, a kind of ghost work. And yet, it's not just tragedy. You saw the camaraderie, the stolen jokes, the fierce competence. There's dignity in it, even rebellion. You think of the maid saying, "Everyone's lost down here," and realize she might have meant everyone, upstairs included. You wander a little longer, tracing the faint vibration of the bells on the wall, each one labeled in careful script: morning room, drawing room, library, nursery. The tiny levers twitch occasionally, messages from above. Somewhere, a servant answers each call like clockwork. It's oddly beautiful, this hidden communication network, like a nervous system pulsing under polished skin. You reach out and gently touch one of the brass plates. It's warm, alive. A door closes somewhere behind you. Footsteps echo faintly overhead. The world of lace and manners resumes its performance, unaware, or pretending not to know, that an entire shadow kingdom hums beneath it. You take a deep breath, and for the first time, you catch a scent rising from below, bread baking, soap, a trace of something herbal, life raw and unperfumed. You don't feel well. That's the first thing you realize after climbing back up from the servants' floor. Your head swims, your stomach tilts, and your lungs feel like they've been breathing fireplace residue for hours. You sit on the edge of your bed, dizzy and clammy, thinking maybe it's just the corset flashbacks, or the lingering scent of boiled mutton. But no, something's definitely wrong. You reach for the bell pull beside the bed. The little wire jingles somewhere deep in the wall, and within a minute, footsteps approach. A maid appears, quick and concerned. "You look pale," she says, which in this century might as well mean you're halfway to the grave. "Shall I fetch the doctor?" You nod weakly. She curtsies and vanishes. The room tilts gently while you wait. You stare at the ceiling, painted with faint cracks that look like veins. Appropriate, since everyone here seems obsessed with circulation, both of blood and of gossip. Somewhere downstairs, you hear the low murmur of conversation, the clink of china. Life continues smoothly, as though illness is merely a decorative inconvenience. The door opens again, and the doctor steps in. He looks precisely like someone's idea of trustworthiness from a distance. Tall, neat beard, pince-nez glasses, a waistcoat that smells faintly of camphor. Up close, he's less reassuring, a bit too cheerful for someone carrying a bag full of sharp objects. "Well now," he says briskly, "a touch of faintness I hear? A chill, perhaps?" You nod. "Something like that." He sets down his bag with a thump that could wake the dead. "Nothing unusual," he says, already rolling up his sleeves. "The air in these houses is dreadful for modern constitutions. All this damp, all this gaslight. A simple imbalance of humours, no doubt." Humours. You blink. You've stepped into the century where medicine still half believes the body runs on medieval philosophy. He rummages through his instruments with the enthusiasm of a man choosing lunch. "We'll start with leeches," he declares. "Leeches?" you echo, voice faint. "Only a few," he assures you, as though quantity affects sanity. "You'll feel quite restored after a cleansing of the system." He produces a small glass jar. Inside, several black, writhing things swim lazily, sensing freedom. You instinctively scoot back on the bed. Now, he soothes. "These fellows are quite the medical marvel. Discovered anew, you might say. The French swear by them." A mainstream historical fact, Victorian medicine adored leeches. Physicians used them for everything from headaches to hysteria, claiming they balanced the blood and improved the moral temperament. In 1830 alone, Britain imported over 40 million leeches. You're pretty sure at least half ended up in this man's bag. You try to protest. "I'm not sure that's necessary." He interrupts cheerfully. "Prevention, my dear patient, is the soul of health." He gestures for your arm. "If not the leeches, then perhaps a brisk dose of mercury. Marvelous for purging impurities." You stare at him. "Mercury? Tea, please." While she's gone, you lie back and stare at the ceiling again, thinking about the absurdity of it all. Medicine here feels more like superstition with better branding. You imagine modern doctors watching this scene with a mix of horror and amusement. So you've got the flu? Ah, yes, we'll drain your blood and give you poison. Perfect. A fringe tidbit, some Victorian electrotherapy devices were marketed for home use. They promised to cure anything from gout to depression through gentle shocks. Basically a 19th century infomercial for self-administered tasers. There's even record of one company selling electric corsets, advertised as invigorating the female form. You're almost tempted to see if it works better than a gym membership. The maid returns with tea, mercifully normal. You sip, feeling warmth seep back into your chest. She lingers, glancing toward the door before whispering, "Don't let him put leeches on you." Mrs. Davenport did, and she still has the scars. You glance at her, half smiling. "Do you trust him?" "Trust him," she snorts softly. "He's the doctor. We don't trust doctors. We survive them." You both laugh quietly, and act of rebellion against medicine itself. The sound of a carriage outside breaks the moment. You pull aside the curtain and watch a woman step out, pale and trembling, escorted by another maid. The doctor meets her at the door. "Ah, Mrs. Whitby," he says loudly. "Our old friend Hysteria again?" You flinch at the word hysteria, the century's favourite diagnosis, a convenient label for every possible symptom a woman might have: fatigue, boredom, ambition, grief. The cure? Rest cures, cold baths, or in some cases what the polite pamphlets called pelvic massage therapy. You shudder, remembering that detail from history books you never thought you'd live through. Historians still argue whether hysteria was a medical delusion or a cultural one, a way of turning women's frustration into pathology. Either way, the line between treatment and control was as thin as a corset string. You watch as the woman is ushered inside. Her face is blank, resigned. The doctor guides her toward the drawing room, muttering something about vapors and tranquility. You can't help but wonder if she's actually sick, or just tired of being alive in a century that doesn't believe her. The maid beside you sighs. "Poor thing," she murmurs. "She'll spend a week lying still while he congratulates himself." You whisper, "Maybe rest will help." She shakes her head. "It's not rest when someone else tells you to take it." The words linger long after she leaves. You finish your tea and stretch carefully. The dizziness has faded, replaced by a strange clarity. You're starting to see the pattern. Everything in this house, its fashion, its etiquette, even its medicine, is built on control. The body, the air, the emotions, each must be disciplined. Comfort is suspicious. You wander to the mirror. Your reflection looks pale still, but sharper somehow, eyes bright in the candlelight. You touch your cheek, half expecting to feel a leech. None, thankfully. From the hallway, the doctor's voice drifts faintly upward. Nervous disorders are quite fashionable these days. Keeps one from boredom. You can't help laughing softly, though it borders on hysteria. Later, you find the laudanum bottle still on your table. The label in elegant script reads, "Soothing syrup for restless nerves and disturbed tempers." You set it back down untouched. There's something both beautiful and terrible about how much faith people place in tiny bottles. You open the window instead. The evening air rushes in, cold and raw, but honest. Outside, the city breathes. Smog, soot, horse manure, and life. You take a deep breath, thinking you'll take your chances with germs over mercury. Below, the gas lamps flicker. The world beyond this house moves toward night, and somewhere out there, progress waits. Vaccines, antibiotics, sanity. But for now, you close the window, blow out the candle, and sink into bed, half laughing at your survival. Afternoon comes wrapped in a delicate hush, like the pause before judgment. The house smells faintly of lemon polish and nerves, an unmistakable sign that tea is imminent. Somewhere downstairs, the drawing room fire has been stoked to a glow. The porcelain cups are warming, and the silver spoons are lined up like soldiers awaiting inspection. You've survived the doctor's visit, though you're still not convinced the treatment wasn't just an elaborate prank played by the century itself. Now your next ordeal arrives, social etiquette. The maid who leads you down the staircase moves as if gravity doesn't apply to her, every step measured, every gesture graceful. "Mind your posture," she whispers, as though your very vertebrae could betray you. The mistress notices everything. You reach the drawing room, where time seems to hold its breath. Everything is upholstered, embroidered or embroidered upon. Lace antimacassars draped on chairs, embroidered cushions piled like trophies of domestic conquest, and wallpaper so floral it looks like it might bloom again if watered. At the center of it all sits Mrs. Davenport, your hostess, as rigid and glossy as a porcelain doll. "Ah, our guest from the future," she says, with a smile sharp enough to slice butter. "Do sit down. We were just about to take tea." You sink onto the edge of a chair, hands folded like a repentant schoolchild. The sofa sighs under your weight, a sound that earns a subtle wince from Mrs. Davenport. "Do be careful," she says lightly. "The springs are delicate." "Of course," you murmur, mentally adding everything here is delicate, including my will to live. The maid sets the tea tray down with practiced grace, silver teapot, milk jug, sugar tongs, tiered stand of scones, sandwiches, and the faint terror of social scrutiny. It looks harmless enough. Then Mrs. Davenport picks up her cup, and the ritual begins. She pours the tea with the solemnity of a priest anointing the faithful. "You'll take milk, I presume?" You hesitate. The entire room leans in. This, you suddenly realize, is a test, one historical fact. In the Victorian era, even when you added milk to your tea mattered. Milk first was considered a sign of lower-class habits, since cheaper china might crack from hot liquid, while tea first demonstrated confidence in your porcelain's pedigree. Whole friendships lived or died on that order. "Tea first, please," you say, gambling your reputation on the sturdiness of the cup. Mrs. Davenport's smile softens a fraction. "Quite right." A murmur of approval ripples through the room. You exhale, one spoon angle from disaster, and you've passed your first test. Then comes the question of stirring. You grasp the spoon gingerly, swirl the tea clockwise. Wrong. Every head twitches. Mrs. Davenport's eyebrows arch. "Never circularly, dear." One folds the tea back and forth gently. "We are not making soup." You apologize, cheeks warm. "Of course. Folding, naturally." The footman suppresses a smirk. You consider faking your own fainting spell to escape. Another tidbit, the Victorians had an entire science of etiquette manuals, thousands of pages dictating every conceivable gesture. Books like The Habits of Good Society or Hints on Etiquette and The Usages of Good Society sold like moral instruction disguised as self-help. People learned how to breathe properly, how to enter rooms, how to not offend others with enthusiasm. The result? An empire of polite paranoia. You take a cautious sip. It tastes faintly of bergamot and judgment. Conversation drifts around the table, topics as soft and inoffensive as the scones. Weather, gardening, a cousin's unfortunate cough. Each phrase polished like glass, each laugh carefully measured to sound natural. You try to join in. "I notice the fog seems thicker today," you offer. Mrs. Davenport nods approvingly. "Indeed. Quite the pea souper. My husband says it's progress you can taste." A polite ripple of laughter. You smile, though you're not entirely sure it wasn't a grim joke. Then someone mentions politics, and the temperature in the room drops 2 degrees. Mrs. Davenport raises a single-gloved hand. "My dear, we never discuss Parliament over tea." "Of course not," you say quickly, "just fog." "Precisely," she replies, smiling. "Safe and neutral." You sip again, wondering how anyone in this world manages to stay both upright and sane under such constant restraint. Even your tongue feels corseted. Halfway through the tea service, a small plate of sandwiches arrives. Triangles of cucumber, crusts removed, so perfect they could be displayed in a museum. You take one delicately. The bread feels too soft, the butter too cold, and the silence too thick. Somewhere, a clock ticks, a metronome for awkward civility. Then Mrs. Davenport turns to you with the terrifying warmth of a firing squad captain. "Tell me, dear, are you musical?" You blink. "In theory? How delightful. We shall have a song after tea." You nearly choke on your sandwich. "A song? It's tradition," she says. "A house is not civilized without music." You glance at the grand piano in the corner, its keys gleaming like teeth. "Perhaps something simple, then." "Of course," she purrs. "Simplicity is always becoming." You suspect she's lying. The room moves on to gossip. Mrs. Pettigrew whispers about a neighbour's scandal. Her daughter was seen walking unchaperoned after dusk. "Dusk!" gasps all around. You try not to laugh, but it bubbles up like carbonation. Mrs. Davenport glances sharply. "Something amusing, dear?" You scramble. "Just the unpredictability of dusk." She studies you, then lets it pass. Historians still argue whether Victorian etiquette was truly about morality or merely about class preservation. Some see it as an elegant dance of self-control, others a suffocating cage designed to separate us from them. Either way, one misplaced spoon could exile you socially faster than any crime. You finish your tea in silence, hyper-aware of every gesture. You fold your napkin precisely in half, no smaller, no crumpling, and place it beside your plate. Mrs. Davenport notices. "How refined," she says, as if you've just solved an ethical riddle. Tea concludes with a soft clatter of china and an audible exhale of relief. The footman clears the table. Mrs. Davenport rises. "Now, the piano." You'd hoped she'd forgotten. She seats herself regally in an armchair while you approach the instrument. It gleams in the firelight, smelling faintly of polish and pressure. You press a tentative key. The sound echoes beautifully and far too loudly. Every face turns toward you like sunflowers to light. You start to play something simple, half-remembered, a lullaby. Your fingers stumble once, twice, but the melody finds its way. The room softens. Even Mrs. Davenport's features ease into something resembling genuine enjoyment. When you finish, there's polite applause. Small, restrained, perfect. Mrs. Davenport nods approvingly. Untrained but heartfelt. Quite refreshing. You curtsy awkwardly, praying that counts as a compliment. As the guests drift out, you overhear fragments of conversation. Someone praising your modern confidence. Another whispering about your informal spoon. You realize you've become that day's anecdote, a curiosity in corsets. You step into the hallway, finally able to breathe. The air feels cooler, freer, unfiltered by etiquette. You lean against the wall, dizzy with relief. The maid from earlier appears, carrying a stack of plates. "How was tea?" she asks. "Exhausting," you admit. "I think I'd rather face leeches again." She laughs softly. "At least leeches don't judge how you hold your cup." You both share a conspiratorial grin. Down the corridor you hear Mrs. Davenport's voice float faintly. "We must invite her again. Such potential." You shiver. In this house, survival isn't about strength or wit. It's about grace under surveillance. You're learning the rules, one sip at a time, but the cost is your spontaneity. You wonder if laughter itself might be frowned upon after 6 p.m. You return to your room, collapse onto the bed and think, no wonder everyone here has nervous exhaustion. Living like this is a full-time performance. The gaslight flickers, painting lace shadows on the walls. You can still taste the faint tang of bergamot, but it's the aftertaste of control that lingers. Somewhere downstairs, the piano plays again, perfectly, mechanically, as if to remind you that even music here obeys the rules. You close your eyes and exhale slowly. Surviving Victorian etiquette feels less like learning manners and more like navigating a minefield made of teacups. The air outside greets you like a damp handshake, cold, sticky, and suspiciously opaque. You step out through the heavy front door, and the world instantly narrows to a ghostly blur. The house behind you disappears into the mist, as if embarrassed to be seen. You blink, trying to focus, but the fog is too thick. It clings to your lashes, curls around your face, and tastes faintly of metal and soot. Welcome to London's famous pea soup fog, romantic in novels, lethal in person. You take one cautious breath, and immediately regret it. The air has weight, like you're inhaling a coal mine. It scratches your throat, fills your lungs, and makes you wonder how anyone survives long enough to write poetry about this. Somewhere in the distance, a carriage rattles, muffled and uncertain, its lanterns glowing like submerged stars. You take a few tentative steps. The ground squelches underfoot, mud and horse manure having formed an alliance against clean shoes. Each step feels like you're walking deeper into someone else's bad dream. A passing shadow looms, a man in a bowler hat, emerging from the murk just long enough to tip it politely before vanishing again. Victorian courtesy survives even when visibility doesn't. You cough once, twice, eyes watering. Pea soup fog, they called it. And for once, the Victorians weren't exaggerating. A mainstream historical fact, London's notorious fogs weren't natural at all. They were the product of coal smoke mixing with damp air, a kind of industrial weather brewed by a million chimneys. In 1873, one such smog was so dense it lasted for 5 days, turned day into night, and killed hundreds. The phrase pea souper wasn't charming. It was an obituary. You pull your scarf tighter and keep moving because standing still feels like tempting pneumonia. The gas lamps along the street burn weakly, their halos barely piercing the yellow murk. They don't illuminate so much as announce their struggle. Each flicker a weary cough. A figure materializes beside you. A newsboy, thin as a wire, clutching a stack of papers. "Even in, miss. Extra. Fog delays trains. 5 drowned in the Thames." You fumble for a coin, but he's already gone, swallowed by the haze. His voice trails behind like an echo. "Mind the curbs. People's gone missing." The warning chills you more than the air does. You inch along the street, feeling your way past slick brick walls. Somewhere nearby, a horse snorts and stamps, invisible but alarmingly close. The sound of hooves grows louder, then a hansom cab bursts from the fog. Driver squinting, horse steaming like a locomotive. You leap aside just in time. "Watch where you're standing," the driver yells, his words half lost in the smog. "Watch where you're driving," you mutter, coughing again. but he's already gone, swallowed by the same grey mouth that birthed him. For a brief moment you consider turning back, but curiosity or stubbornness wins. You want to see the city, even if it might kill you first. The fog thickens as you near the river. The air smells of coal tar and decay, with a hint of something sweet and wrong, like rotting fruit. Your shoes slip on the cobblestones. Each step echoes in a space that feels both infinite and claustrophobic. Somewhere close, you hear a bell tolling slowly. Church or ship, it's impossible to tell. Time itself feels suspended. You catch a flicker of movement, a woman in a shawl, face wrapped tight, lantern swinging from her hand. She pauses when she sees you. Lost, are you? You nod, trying to find the river. She chuckles, low and rough. You've already found it, just don't step too far left. You peer downward and realize with a jolt that the fog hides not just the water, but the very edge of the quay. One more step, and you'd have joined the Thames in its eternal murk. Thank you, you whisper. She shrugs. City'll eat you if you let it. Best stay close to the light. Then she turns and vanishes, lantern bobbing like a firefly swallowed by smoke. You stand there a moment, heart hammering. It's easy to see how legends of ghosts thrive here. When you can't tell whether a shadow breathes or remembers, imagination fills in the blanks, a fringe tidbit. Some Victorians genuinely believed the fog carried spirits of the dead, a byproduct of industrial sin. Newspapers printed accounts of phantom figures glimpsed in the smog, sometimes angels, sometimes devils, depending on the reader's theology and lung capacity. Scientists tried to explain it as optical illusion, but the superstition clung tighter than soot. You pull your coat closer and begin retracing your steps. The gaslight behind you flickers, its glow warped by the swirling air. Each lamp becomes a tiny sun trapped in amber, and then footsteps, not yours. Slow, deliberate following. You stop. So do they. Hello? You call, instantly regretting it. The fog eats your voice whole. No answer. You start walking again, faster. The steps match your pace. When you pause, they do too. Your heart thuds louder than the city. You turn sharply and squint into the haze. For a moment, you see a shape, a tall figure, coat long, hat broad, but then it's gone, replaced by a wall of grey. Maybe it's your imagination. Maybe it's someone else lost, like you. But the Victorian mind whispers something darker. Jack the Ripper still prowls these streets, at least in stories, and every shadow feels like an accusation. You quicken your pace, nearly running. The cobblestones blur beneath your feet. The fog shifts, thins slightly. A faint orange glow ahead. Home, safety, salvation by candlelight. You break through into an open square. The fog here swirls like smoke above a dying fire. A lamplighter stands on a ladder, long pole in hand, coaxing flame from gas. He glances down at you. Out late, miss? You nod, catching your breath. It's thicker than I expected. He chuckles. That's London for you. The city breathes coal and we breathe it back. Keeps us warm, or so they say. He lights another lamp, the flame sputtering before it steadies. Word is they'll fix it one day. Cleaner air, cleaner lungs. Some gentleman's got an idea for smokeless fuel. Does it work? You ask. Historians will have to argue that one, he says with a wink, if any of us live long enough to ask 'em. You smile faintly, and for a moment the fog feels less menacing. The lamplighter's glow casts soft halos in the gloom, turning the square into a constellation of fragile suns. You thank him and continue, on. By the time you reach the house again, your clothes smell like a fireplace, your hair like soot, and your lungs like regret. The door opens before you knock. The maid, startled by your apparition-like return. Mercy, she whispers. You look like the fog itself walked in. You step inside, coughing. You could say it followed me home. She takes your coat, brushing off soot that refuses to let go. No one should go out in that, she scolds. Kills folks every winter. Just last year, a man wandered off his own doorstep and never came back. Did they find him, you ask? She shakes her head. Only his hat. Yo. You shiver, suddenly grateful for the house's stale, coal-scented warmth. In your room, you peel off your damp gloves and watch the fog press against the window like a living thing. It breathes, shifts, sighs. You wonder how many people in this city are breathing the same poisoned air, lungs blackening one polite breath at a time. Progress, they called it. The cost of civilization. You light a candle, its flame steady and gold, cutting a small circle of clarity through the gloom. Outside, the fog thickens again, swallowing the world. The sound of hooves fades, then stops entirely, as if even the horses have decided to give up. You sit by the window, watching the dark move, And think of how modern life, electric lights, clean air, crisp mornings, wasn't inevitable. Someone had to live through this century's murk first, coughing up the price of the future. Still, as awful as it is, there's a strange beauty in the fog. It hides ugliness, blurs edges, turns the city into a watercolor dream. For a fleeting moment you understand the poets who found romance in this misery. Then you cough again and decide romance is overrated. The candle flickers. The fog presses closer, whispering against the glass. Somewhere deep inside the house, a floorboard creaks and you remember what waits within. Gaslight, ghosts and gossip. But out there, in that endless grey, London itself feels alive, breathing you in as you breathe it out. You close the curtain and retreat to bed, lungs aching but mind humming with what you've seen, or imagined. Either way, you've survived the smog. You wouldn't have wandered into the nursery if the house hadn't gone so uncomfortably quiet. After the day's fog and etiquette marathons, silence feels suspicious here, like the calm in a fairy tale right before the floorboards start whispering. You're halfway up the staircase when you notice a faint, chiming tune drifting from above. It's sweet at first, almost soothing, but the longer you listen, the less it sounds like music, and the more it sounds like something trying to remember how to be human. The nursery sits at the far end of the upper corridor, tucked behind a white door trimmed in chipped paint. You push it open and step inside. It smells faintly of lavender, chalk, and dust. The fire in the small grate burns low, throwing long shadows across a room that's both cozy and unnerving. Rows of dolls sit perfectly still on a shelf, each one frozen mid-smile, some glassy-eyed, some missing hair, all faintly accusing. A wooden rocking horse stands in the center, its paint cracked, mane stiff with age. When the wind sneaks through the chimney, the horse rocks once on its own, creaking softly. You whisper, "Nope," but curiosity keeps you rooted. The tune you heard turns out to be a music box on the table, a small brass contraption wound almost to breaking. Its ballerina spins stiffly in circles, her face rubbed away by time. You lean in, listening to the tinny melody when a voice startles you. "Best not touch that," says someone behind you. You turn. A woman stands in the doorway, tall and straight, wearing a grey dress buttoned to the throat and a cap so crisp it could slice bread. Her expression is equal parts patience and judgment. The archetypal Victorian nanny has entered the chat. "Oh," you say, stepping back. "Sorry, I just heard music." She nods curtly. "The children like it, or rather they used to." You glance around. "They're asleep?" In a manner of speaking, you freeze, unsure whether she means metaphorically or not. But she moves past you, adjusting a curtain, setting a toy soldier upright, all with the practiced efficiency of someone who's tidied away centuries of chaos. "I'm Miss Pratt," she says. "You're the visitor, guilty. Best mind your step then. Toys have a habit of tripping the unwary." You look down and realize the floor is scattered with marbles, small glass orbs glinting in the firelight like unblinking eyes. "Lovely," you mutt. She doesn't smile. Children must learn to pick up after themselves. It's character building. A mainstream historical fact. Victorian nurseries weren't playgrounds. They were classrooms of morality. Every toy had an agenda. Dolls taught nurturing. Toy soldiers instilled discipline. Miniature kitchens rehearsed domesticity. Even play was propaganda for adulthood. You wander toward a dollhouse that dominates one corner. It's exquisite. 3 stories, tiny chandeliers, wallpaper matching the real house. But inside, every little figure stands perfectly still, posed mid-gesture. One tiny maid has her arm raised as though perpetually dusting. The father figure's hand is frozen over a miniature newspaper. It's a diorama of routine, a shrine to predictability. Miss Pratt notices your stare. They like things in their proper place. The children? She tilts her head slightly. The dolls. Okay then. You sit on a small wooden chair that creaks under modern weight. "Where are the children now?" you ask carefully. "In bed," she says, "as good children should be by now, though it's not for me to say what they dream about." You glance toward a curtained alcove where 2 small beds sit side by side. Tiny embroidered initials mark the pillows, H and L. The firelight dances over their surfaces, and for a moment, you think you see movement. Then again, maybe it's just the shadows shifting. Miss Pratt busies herself folding a blanket. "They had lovely manners," she says, almost to herself. "Recited their prayers, never spoke out of turn, perfect angels." Her tone makes you wonder whether angels is meant literally. You clear your throat. "Did they like stories?" "Of course. I told them the classics. Little Red Riding Hood, The Goose Girl, and of course, The New Mother." You blink. "The what?" She straightens. "You don't know it. You shake your head. She folds her hands neatly. A Tale by Lucy Clifford. 2 children misbehave and are replaced by a mother with glass eyes and a wooden tail. Teaches obedience. You try not to shudder. That's one way to make a point. A fringe tidbit. Victorian children's literature was obsessed with punishment. Stories didn't just warn, they promised. Mischievous kids were turned into statues, eaten by wolves, or visited by demon nannies. Struwell Peter, imported from Germany, described children burning alive for playing with matches. These weren't bedtime stories, they were survival manuals disguised as morals. Miss Pratt watches you with faint amusement. You moderns, you coddle children with happy endings. We preferred truth. The world is cruel. Better they learn it early. You want to argue, but the dolls behind her seem to be listening, their glass eyes catching every flicker of firelight. Somewhere in the room, a clock ticks unevenly. You realize you haven't heard a single child's breath since you entered. Miss Pratt notices your unease. They're quite still tonight. The fog unsettles them. They dream of ships lost on the Thames and horses that can't find their way home. You glance again at the beds. The embroidered initials seem to shimmer faintly, as if heat or breath were rising from them. Would you like to hear their lullaby? She asks. You hesitate. Sure. She goes to the rocking chair, sits and begins to hum. The tune is low and slow, each note a sigh. The words, when they come, are soft but chilling. Hush now, the night has teeth. Close your eyes, be still beneath. Angels watch with wings of stone. Dream good dreams, or dream alone. By the time she finishes, even the fire seems to burn quieter. That's haunting, you whisper. She nods. All lullabies are. They're warnings we sing softly. Historians still argue whether Victorian nannies were protectors or jailers. Some accounts describe them as beloved family anchors. Others paint them as stern enforcers of repression. They lived between worlds, trusted yet unseen, caring yet controlled. Like ghosts with housekeeping duties. Miss Pratt rises. You should return to your room. The nursery isn't meant for grown-ups. Why not? She smiles faintly. Grown-ups forget how to behave in rooms that remember. You stand, brushing dust from your skirt, though the air feels heavier now, as if thick with old lullabies. On the way out, you glance back. For a moment you swear the ballerina in the music box has turned her head to watch you. Down the hall, the house creaks in its sleep. You pause at the landing, listening. There, soft footsteps, light as marbles rolling across wood. You turn, but no one's there. Only the faint echo of that lullaby humming itself to sleep. In your own room you light a candle, heart still thudding. The air smells faintly of lavender again. You look down, and there, beside your bed, lies a single glass marble. You pick it up slowly. It's warm to the touch. Inside, a swirl of pale blue seems to pulse like a heartbeat. You place it on the table, deciding not to think too hard about how it got there. Maybe Miss Pratt's idea of tidiness extends to souvenirs. Maybe the house just likes to share. As the candle burns lower, you catch a sound, soft, rhythmic, from above. The rocking horse, creaking once, twice, in perfect lullaby tempo. You pull the covers up to your chin and whisper, "Nope," again, this time with feeling. But somewhere deep down you can't help smiling. Because if there's one thing you've learned about Victorian life by now, it's this. Even their bedtime was a moral lesson. You close your eyes, half expecting to dream of dolls with opinions. Instead you dream of fog swirling through a dollhouse city, tiny lights flickering behind tiny curtains. The ballerina spins, the nanny hums, and the marbles roll themselves neatly into a line. Everything in its proper place, even you. Dinner smells like ceremony, fire, and something faintly metallic. You enter the dining room, and the air wraps around you, warm but heavy, scented with roast meat, candle wax, and just a hint of old books. The table is set immaculately. Polished silver gleams under the flicker of dozens of candles, napkins folded like origami swans, plates so white they almost hurt to look at. Every chair has its place, but some remain empty, their settings untouched yet meticulously prepared. You hesitate at the doorway. A maid notices and nods. "Sit anywhere," she murmurs, though her eyes linger on the vacant chairs, almost mournful. You slide into a chair beside the footman who led you up the servant stairs yesterday. He smiles faintly, polite, resigned. You notice a small pin on his waistcoat, an emblem you don't recognize, possibly a family crest or a badge of some secret society. He glances at the empty seats too, expression flickering, then returns his attention to the candlelight. Mrs. Davenport, the mistress of the house, presides at the head. She gestures at the vacant chairs with the grace of a queen, yet there's something unsettling in her eyes. "We dine with the company we keep," she says lightly, voice a perfect mix of charm and chill. a mainstream historical fact. Victorians were obsessed with the supernatural. Spiritualism swept through the upper and middle classes in the mid to late 19th century. Seances, table tapping, and spirit photography were not merely entertainment. They were considered morally and intellectually respectable, as long as you didn't laugh too loudly. The conversation starts gently about the menu and the weather. Roast beef, potatoes, Yorkshire pudding, simple, sturdy fare. But soon it drifts almost imperceptibly toward the extraordinary. The eldest daughter leans forward, eyes bright. "I wonder if Mother will call the spirits tonight," she says. "Perhaps," Mrs. Davenport replies, placing her knife beside her plate with deliberate precision. "We have a few questions of our own." You swallow. Questions? Of whom? A small flickering candle casts shadows along the wall, elongating the empty chai. RS into figures that seem almost human. You glance at them. Are they purely empty, or has the house absorbed something of the people who used to occupy these places? The footman next to you coughs lightly, breaking your reverie. "They're simply reminders," he says. "Keeps us aware of history." You nod, though your stomach twists. There's something both poetic and terrifying about eating in a room where every empty seat carries expectation. A fringe tidbit. Some Victorian families went so far as to set empty chairs for deceased relatives at dinner, believing their spirits could attend. The plates were untouched, but the presence was considered real. The practice wasn't universal, but accounts persist in diaries and letters across London and beyond. The conversation deepens, guided subtly by Mrs. Davenport. "Dr. Hartley says the dead sometimes linger," she murmurs, fingering her wine glass. "He claims the vibrations of the room and the sincerity of the living can summon answers." A hush falls. Even the flickering candle seems to lean closer. You notice the family's eyes glinting with anticipation, and the footman beside you adjusts his posture, stiff as if bracing for unseen scrutiny. Historians still argue whether Victorian spiritualism was mostly charlatanry or sincere belief. Evidence suggests both. Some genuinely perceived communication with the dead, while others exploited the practice for profit or status. Either way, the effect on domestic life was profound. You sip your wine or water, cautiously avoiding alcohol in a century that might see you collapse from the merest drop. And listen. There's a ritualistic rhythm to this table. Conversation, pause, glance at the empty chairs, gentle probing into the beyond. Even the servants, careful not to interrupt, hover nearby, their eyes flicking to the shadows that seem just slightly too long. A young boy, the youngest of the household, fidgets beside his plate. He pushes meat around with a fork, absently tapping rhythmically on the table. "Do you think they can really hear us?" he asks quietly. Mrs. Davenport smiles faintly. "I think they choose to. The living must do their part correctly." You glance at the empty chair across from you, place setting pristine, the silver glinting in candlelight. You almost expect someone to appear. A faint silhouette, a ripple of heat, a whisper that chills your spine. The meal proceeds, each bite eaten with exaggerated care. The family discusses minor scandals, news from town, and occasionally their thoughts on the afterlife. The shadows lengthen as the candles burn low, dancing along the walls, stretching the empty seats into grotesque parodies of company. A candle guttering signals the next phase. A small séance table, set separately with a crystal bowl and a brass pendulum, waits at the far end of the room. You hear whispers, soft, urgent. Someone suggests asking the spirits about the family fortune. Another wonders about the fate of a long-lost relative. You sit frozen, realizing that what you thought was eerie storytelling is about to become participation. The family gathers, hands hovering over the table. You almost back away, but curiosity pins you in place. Miss Pratt's voice echoes in your memory. Grown-ups forget how to behave in rooms that remember. You glance around the table. Everyone is serious, almost reverent. Even the footman holds his hand over the table, fingers trembling slightly. The crystal bowl shivers. The pendulum swings. "Who is with us?" Mrs. Davenport whispers. A chill runs down your spine. You don't want to know, yet you do. The air thickens. You can hear faint breathing. Not yours, not entirely. Maybe imagination, maybe something else. They ask questions. The pendulum swings, subtle at first, then stronger. Will the fortune remain in the family? Is the house safe? Do we honor our ancestors? Each question carries weight. The answers, if they come, will be felt rather than heard. You watch Some family members flinch. Others nod, seemingly understanding something beyond the living world. You try to steady your own breathing. Rational thought whispers that this is theatrics. that your Victorian hosts thrive on theatre and fear, yet the hair on your arms prickles, and the empty chairs seem closer, waiting. The meal concludes with no definitive proof, no ghostly apparitions, just the faint echo of the pendulum's swing and the lingering tension in the room. Conversation resumes cautiously, as though the unseen audience has departed but left the room forever altered. You push back your chair, finally able to breathe without fear. The plates are cleared, yet the memory of those empty seats remains. Shadows on the walls stretch like reminders of mortality, propriety, and a world that mingled the living with the dead at every meal. You wonder how many other houses host dinners like this, where spirits might attend uninvited and etiquette demands that the living behave perfectly. As you leave the dining room, footsteps echo down the hall. Somewhere, a clock chimes midnight, though you're not sure if it's accurate. You slip into your room, candle flickering low. Tonight you've eaten with the living, the dead, and the ghosts of manners past, and survived. Barely. The stairs to the attic groan under your weight, each step a creaking warning. You pause halfway, hand on the banister, listening. Below, the house sleeps, or at least pretends to. Above, something waits. Dust, darkness, secrets, and the faint scent of old cedar. Your curiosity outweighs caution, so you continue upward, the air growing colder and drier with every step. The attic door is low, heavy, and warped with age. You push it open, and a puff of musty air greets you like a sigh from another century. Dust motes float in the candlelight, tiny golden dancers suspended in silence. The space is vast, sloping, filled with trunks, boxes, and furniture draped in white sheets like silent sentinels. Every object seems to hold a story, though none of them are eager to share. You step carefully over a loose board, wincing as it groans, and suddenly realize how loud you must be. The house seems to lean closer, listening. A draft whispers along the rafters, carrying the faintest smell of mothballs, cedar, and something else, almost metallic. You move toward a row of trunks stacked against the far wall. Their leather is cracked and worn, brass fittings tarnished. One trunk bears the initials of a long-dead family member. You run your hand over it, imagining what might be inside. Old letters, forgotten dresses, perhaps something better left unseen. A mainstream historical fact. Victorian attics were not mere storage spaces, they were essential to the household economy. Trunks held clothing out of season, linens for guests, toys for children, and sometimes valuable family documents. Households preserved not only material wealth, but memory itself in these cramped, dusty spaces. You lift the lid of one trunk. Inside, it smells faintly of lavender and decay. There are stacks of letters tied with ribbon, a faded shawl, and a small wooden box with a lock but no key. You set it aside, wary. Curiosity here can be dangerous. Some households believed that disturbing stored possessions could awaken spirits tied to memory. You approach another trunk and hesitate. On top sits a collection of taxidermy, birds with glassy eyes, a squirrel poised mid-leap, a fox curled in eternally alert repose. The birds seem almost alive in the flickering candlelight. Their tiny beaks glint. You step back, uneasy. A fringe tidbit, Victorian taxidermy wasn't merely decorative, it was scientific, moralistic, and occasionally theatrical. Some families displayed exotic animals to flaunt travel wealth or mastery over nature. Others kept pets preserved as memento mori, a reminder that death and domesticity were closer than you'd like to think. You move deeper into the attic. Each trunk, each shadow, each stuffed creature seems to watch you, waiting to see if you respect their silence. You glance at the far corner and see a trunk with a dark cloth draped over it. Something about it feels wrong. You approach slowly. The cloth is heavy, almost velvet, and underneath is the faint outline of a tall object. Maybe furniture, maybe something else. Historians still argue whether Victorian houses encouraged spiritual encounters in attics, or whether these stories are exaggerations. Certainly, children were warned not to go near attics alone. Adults often claimed the spaces were haunted, but accounts vary between superstition and genuine experience. You, standing here, can feel the line blur. A cold draft snakes along your neck. You shiver and glance up. The rafters seem to bend in the candlelight, forming shadowy arches that your imagination instantly decorates with faces. You turn quickly toward the nearest trunk to ground yourself. Inside you find nothing, only silk scarves, a cracked porcelain doll head, and a faintly yellowed letter. You pick up the doll head, Its eyes stare past you, unblinking. You set it down immediately, heart hammering. Somewhere above, a floorboard shifts. Not yours. You freeze, listening. The attic is otherwise silent, yet you feel watched. The TA. Zydomy Fox seems to twitch. The bird's glassy eyes glint. You tell yourself it's the play of shadows, the tilt of the candle, the fog outside filtering light into the sloped ceiling. Yet your instincts scream differently. You approach the trunk draped in cloth. The object underneath is heavier than expected, though you can't see its shape clearly. You lift the edge and gasp softly. It's a mannequin, dressed in a long coat and top hat, face blank, hands folded as if waiting politely. Your pulse quickens. "Of course," you murmur, voice barely above a whisper. "Because why wouldn't there be a mannequin?" You step back and lean against a trunk, catching your breath. Every sound echoes in the vast attic. A pipe rumbles faintly below. The wind rattles the tiny window panes, and the house groans like a creature settling in its sleep. You notice a small table tucked in the corner. On it sits a silver hand mirror, tarnished and warped. You pick it up and glance. Your reflection flickers oddly, distorted. The candle behind you wavers, and for a moment, it almost looks like there's someone standing behind you. You spin, but the attic is empty. Only shadows and dust. The wooden floor creaks again. This time it's closer. You freeze, gripping the mirror. Your breath comes in shallow gasps. You can feel the weight of the space pressing in, as if the attic itself is alive, keeping a record of every resident, every visitor, every misstep. A lullaby hum drifts faintly from below. Your memory snaps back to the nursery. You swallow hard. The house seems to sing itself awake when humans wander too freely. You take one last glance at the mannequins, the dolls, the taxidermy creatures, and the trunks. There's a rhythm to their arrangement, a kind of careful order that suggests a household aware of time, memory, and mortality. To disturb it is to invite discomfort, or worse. With a cautious step, you make your way to the stairs. One glance back at the attic's shadowed corners, and you feel certain the mannequin's gaze follows you. The draft brushes against your face again, cold, whispering through the cracks in the rafters. You descend slowly, heart still racing. Each step echoes like a warning. By the time you reach the main hall, the warmth of the house feels like a small mercy. The candlelight flickers, the shadows shrink. Yet a part of you can't shake the feeling that the attic waits, patient, ready for your next curiosity. Somewhere deep in the house, a floorboard shifts. You freeze instinctively, reminding yourself that curiosity has a price in a Victorian home, and attics are where it's often paid. The library's door groans as you push it open, and the smell hits you immediately. Paper, leather, ink, and just a whisper of decay. It's heavy and intoxicating, like walking into a cathedral devoted to knowledge and secrets. Dust floats in the candlelight, clinging to the air like tiny golden ghosts, and the room stretches wider than you expect, with tall shelves disappearing into shadow, stacked floor to ceiling with books that haven't seen sunlight in decades. You step carefully across the worn carpet, feeling the history under your feet. The shelves are packed with volumes of every size and shape, encyclopedias, leather-bound poetry, legal tomes, and odd, tiny manuscripts with titles that make your eyebrows rise. One book, barely larger than your palm, has a cover embossed with an Ouroboros, teeth sinking into tail. You resist the urge to open it immediately, though your curiosity screams otherwise. A mainstream historical fact, Victorian libraries were not only repositories of literature, they were social statements. The number and quality of books indicated wealth, education, and cultural sophistication. Large private libraries were often pride points for families, meticulously arranged and strictly maintained. A missing book could be scandalous. You run a hand along the shelves, fingers brushing spines smooth and cracked alike. Our gaze catches a slight misalignment, a row of books not flush with the others. You push gently, and a section of the shelf swings inward with a faint click. Behind it, a narrow recess stretches into darkness. Your pulse quickens. Hidden compartments like this were common in Victorian houses, used for valuables, letters, and sometimes secrets, best left unread. You shine your candle into the space and see stacks of papers, a small locked box, and a leather-bound journal. The scent of old ink rises to meet you, pungent and slightly metallic. You pull the journal forward carefully. The cover is cracked, and the pages yellowed, the handwriting elegant yet tense. You flip through. seeing references to strange experiments, correspondences with obscure societies, and notes about observing apparitions in the home. A fringe tidbit: some Victorian families were fascinated by the occult, creating private collections of forbidden books, esoteric manuscripts and journals, detailing seances, astrology, or alchemical experiments. These weren't always for show, they were serious investigations into the nature of life, death, and the unknown. The candlelight flickers, casting long shadows across the library. Somewhere behind you, a floorboard creaks faintly, though the house is quiet. You glance around, nothing moves. Yet the air feels heavier, as if the walls themselves are watching your hands, noting every page you turn. Historians still argue whether Victorian interest in the occult was primarily spiritual or intellectual curiosity. Evidence exists for both. Some families genuinely sought contact with the spirit world, while others collected odd books as a form of intellectual prestige. Standing here, surrounded by dusty volumes and secret recesses, the distinction feels irrelevant. You can feel the tension between knowledge and fear vibrating through the room. You move toward the main shelves again, running a finger over the spines, reading titles aloud softly: Philosophiae Naturalis, the complete works of Poe, Manual of Domestic Alchemy, Essays on Apparitions. One leather-bound book seems out of place. It has no title, only a small brass clasp. You unlatch it carefully. Inside are handwritten diagrams, faint sketches of figures in the house, and what looks like floor plans annotated with strange symbols. Notes in the margins discuss hidden passages, ventilation ducts, and safe observation points for watching the house itself without being seen. Your stomach tightens. This is not merely a library, it's a map to the house's secret life. You hear the faintest whisper, like someone exhaling just behind you. The candle wavers, and for a moment, you swear a shadow has moved among the books. You spin, but the room is still, as if holding its breath. Another book falls off a high shelf with a soft thunk. You approach it cautiously. It's a volume on Victorian etiquette, spine cracked, pages yellowed. You open it and see annotations, tiny notes in the margins referencing places in the house, warnings about behavior, reminders of rules. The ghost of manners past seems to reach through the paper. You glance around. The library feels alive. Books seem to hum faintly, shelves creak in rhythm, and the candlelight twists the shadows into shapes that could be lurking readers, or spirits, or just your imagination. The hidden compartment calls again. You lean closer, noticing another recess behind the journal. A small key lies there, tiny and ornate, almost inviting you to unlock something. Your fingers hover, trembling slightly. You hear a soft thump, like a book landing lightly on the floor behind you. You turn quickly. Nothing, except a tall, dust-covered bookshelf that wasn't quite aligned with the rest. You push against it. A section swings outward, revealing a narrow stairway spiraling into darkness. Your curiosity fights with instinct. The stairwell smells faintly of damp wood, mold, and something metallic again, like iron or blood. You turn. A cautious step down, feeling the cold air rush up to meet you. The candlelight doesn't reach far. Shadows cling to the walls, forming shapes that twist unnaturally. You notice marks on the stairwell, scratches or letters, barely legible, some in English, some in strange symbols. They seem to pulse faintly under your gaze. You pause, letting your eyes adjust. The stairs seem endless, but faint light glimmers at the bottom, as if guiding you. A draft whistles softly, carrying the scent of ink, parchment, and something older, hidden. The journal in your pocket reminds you of the house's obsession with observation. Whoever lived here, or haunts it, valued surveillance, secrecy, and control. You can almost imagine past residents watching, noting, and recording every movement. As you descend, the library above fades into shadow. The air grows colder, more still, charged with quiet expectancy. You realize that this house is not merely a structure, it is an organism of memory, secrecy, and lingering presence. A final glance behind shows the candlelight in the library, flickering over rows of untouched volumes. The room seems to breathe as you leave, books whispering faintly, as if acknowledging your curiosity or warning you against further exploration. You step down into the unknown passageway, heart hammering, aware that each choice brings you closer to truths this house may not want you to know. But you can't stop now. You descend into the servants' quarters with a mixture of curiosity and trepidation. The stairs are narrower here, the air colder, tinged with coal smoke and the faint scent of starch. It's a world entirely separate from the one you've been navigating above, a universe of shadows, whispered instructions, and lives constrained by rigid routines. The walls are low, plaster cracked, and the floorboards groan with every cautious step. You feel like an intruder in a place where silence is not just etiquette but survival. The corridor opens into a long, dimly lit hall. Small doors line the walls, each one leading to a cramped room, furnished with a bed, a chair, and a trunk. The furniture is modest, functional, and worn. Linen sheets are starched, blankets folded with meticulous precision. A few rooms have tiny fireplaces, but most rely on coal stoves whose heat barely reaches the far corners. The occupants are out of sight for the moment, but you sense their presence everywhere, the faint smell of soap, damp clothes, and overworked hands lingering in the air. A mainstream historical fact, Victorian servants lived in hierarchical quarters that reflected their status. The butler and housekeeper had relatively comfortable rooms, often above the main hall, while junior staff shared cramped, often windowless dormitories. Their lives were governed by exacting rules, bedtimes, meal schedules, and labor that began before dawn, and often extended long past sunset. Privacy was a luxury rarely afforded. You pause outside one door and hear faint whispers. Leaning closer, you catch fragments of conversation, words like mistress, tables, midnight, and don't let her see. It's private, almost conspiratorial, and the air carries the unmistakable tension of people discussing matters beyond their authority. A maid emerges quietly from the nearest room, carrying a tray of bread and tea. She moves with careful precision, every step measured, as though invisible eyes watch her constantly. You notice the slight tremor in her hands and the way she glances down the corridor before setting the tray on a table. A fringe tidbit, some Victorian households employed complex codes of behavior and secret communication among staff. Messages were often passed quietly through subtle gestures, small notes, or whispered phrases. Servants developed their own informal hierarchy and social rules, sometimes circumventing the household's rigid authority while still maintaining the appearance of obedience. You walk further down the hall. In one corner, a group of young maids sits stitching by candlelight. Their faces are pale, eyes focused, lips tight with concentration. Occasionally, one glances nervously toward the door, then returns to her work. The air is heavy with the quiet tension of long hours and unspoken rules. You realize that discipline here isn't merely physical, it's psychological. Every movement is watched, every mistake potentially noted and punished. Historians still argue whether the Victorian servant system was exploitative or mutually beneficial. Some suggest it provided stability, skills, and a semblance of social mobility. Others point to long hours, minimal pay, and a constant need for discretion as evidence of a more oppressive structure. Standing here, the reality of their lives feels tangible, immediate, and suffocating. You notice a small nook at the end of the hall, where two footmen huddle over a tiny book, whispering and laughing softly. Their camaraderie is quiet rebellion, a pocket of freedom carved from the strict confines of service. One of them glances at you, startled, then smiles faintly before returning to the text. You wonder what secrets they keep here, what codes of conduct they've developed that you'll never fully understand. The corridor bends, revealing a door slightly ajar. Beyond, the kitchen hums with activity, clattering pots, sizzling meat, and the occasional bark of the head cook. It's chaotic compared to the upstairs dining room, but underneath the noise, there's a rhythm, a choreography perfected over years. The staff moves almost silently, passing each other with fluid efficiency, each aware of the other's space, each step rehearsed to avoid disruption. You peek into a small storeroom and see shelves stacked with preserved foods, spices, and glass jars labeled in careful script. Everything is orderly, yet the air smells faintly of sweat and exertion. It's a reminder that the comfort of the upstairs family relies entirely on the labor, discretion, and endurance of these unseen hands. A young maid catches your gaze. She's brushing crumbs from a tabletop, eyes wary. "You shouldn't be here," she whispers. You nod, realizing that exploration comes at a social cost. Her voice carries the weight of authority wielded quietly. She has authority over her own space, but outside of it, she must obey without question. You continue along the hall, noticing small, personal touches in the rooms. A flower pressed between book pages, a sketch pinned to the wall, a trinket tucked in a drawer. These are the human traces that survive beneath layers of labor, rules, and expectation. In a house like this, the smallest personal act feels like rebellion. A soft murmur rises from the far end of the hall. Someone is reading aloud, a story, a poem, perhaps a letter. The words are gentle or almost soothing, cutting through the oppressive weight of routine. You catch a line, and in the quiet, even the smallest hope survives. You pause, letting it sink in. In the servant's world, hope is subtle, almost imperceptible, yet resilient. You glance around the corridor once more. The rooms are tight, the ceilings low, the air thick with the ghosts of labor, whispered secrets, and carefully hidden camaraderie. You realize that the upstairs world of etiquette, fortune, and spectral dinners is sustained entirely by these lives, silent, disciplined, and overlooked. Every step back toward the main staircase feels like leaving another layer of the house behind. The staff's presence lingers in the air, a subtle hum, a faint scent, a rhythm you can't quite imitate. You pause at the top of the stairs and glance back. Shadows move slightly in the candlelight. Were they watching, or is it your imagination? Perhaps both. You return to your room, heart still buzzing from the glimpse into a world parallel to the one above. Here, in the servants' quarters, rules are different but no less exacting. You realize that survival in a Victorian house isn't only about etiquette, social grace or curiosity. It's about understanding the invisible systems that keep everything in balance. And even then, a single misstep can ripple through the house, unnoticed until it's too late. You settle onto your bed, candle flickering beside you. The whispers, shadows, and faint warmth of the servants' lives echo in your mind, reminding you that every house has layers unseen, lives unnoticed, and rules unspoken. And for now, that knowledge feels both fascinating and unsettling. You awake in the dim pre-dawn light, the house quiet except for the occasional groan of floorboards and the whisper of wind through the chimneys. The memories of the servants' quarters linger, the careful order, the hidden lives, the murmurs that seem to follow you like shadows. You stretch, feeling the weight of the house pressing down, a mixture of comfort and unease. Even alone, you sense that the walls are listening, remembering, cataloguing each heartbeat and breath. The hallways are still, yet familiar creaks echo like ghosts of past movements. You move slowly, tracing your fingers along the banister as though it might guide you through the house's many layers. Dust rises in golden motes with each step, catching the faint light from the narrow windows. Somewhere above, in the nursery, the rocking horse is still, and the music box lies silent, its ballerina frozen mid-spin. You enter the parlor. The furniture appears more benign in the soft morning glow, yet each piece carries the residue of human presence, both living and not. The fireplace, though cold, seems to exhale faintly, and the portraits on the walls watch with unblinking eyes. You pause before a stern-faced ancestor, imagining their gaze following you as you navigate the room. A mainstream historical fact. Victorian houses were designed with hierarchy in mind, and every room reflected the social stratification within. The parlor for family and guests, the dining room for ceremonies, the nursery for children, and the servants' quarters, carefully isolated below or behind hidden corridors. Architecture enforced power, behavior, and observation, and the house itself became a silent participant in daily life. You wander toward the window and peer out. The morning fog lingers over the garden, still thick in patches, ghostly and persistent. You think of the streets outside, the smog that swallowed London, the carriage you narrowly avoided, and the quiet resilience required to walk there alive. You feel the distance between the house and the city, both protective and suffocating. Your attention drifts back inside. The attic, the library, the nursery, and the dining room have all left traces in your mind, textures, smells, shadows, and soft, inexplicable sounds. You realize that every corner of this house contains stories, some whispered, some silent, some watching. You shiver, not from cold, but from the awareness that the house is not merely a building, it is memory, ritual, and subtle menace. A fringe tidbit. Some Victorians believed that houses could carry the imprint of the people who lived there, almost like ghosts trapped in architecture. Objects, rooms, and furniture absorbed energy from emotions, discipline, joy, and grief. When new residents arrived, these residual presences could manifest as unexplained sounds, movements, or feelings, a living memory beyond the capacity of the human eye to fully perceive. You think back to the dinners with the dead, the secret compartments in the library, the servants' whispers, and the dolls' accusing gazes. Historians still argue whether such stories are exaggeration, superstition, or early glimpses of psychological perception, but standing here, you sense the truth lies somewhere in between. You make your way to the front hall one last time. The heavy door awaits, silent and patient. Your hand lingers on the knob as you feel the house breathe, almost imperceptibly. You know leaving won't erase your memories. The house has already inscribed itself on you. Before stepping outside, you glance back at the staircase, the shadowed corridors, and the silent, watchful furniture. The candlelight from yesterday flickers faintly in your imagination, reminding you of both warmth and vigilance. You take a slow, deliberate breath and step through the door. Outside, the fog is lighter, but the air still carries the weight of London's coal smoke. The streets are quieter than before, yet you remember the figures, shadows, and ghostly echoes that haunted every step. You start to walk, heart hammering but eyes open, conscious that the Victorian world you've navigated is both vanished and alive in memory. By the time you leave the estate behind, dawn is breaking fully, the sun diffusing a soft orange light through the lingering fog. You realize that surviving the night is only part of the ordeal. Remembering it, with all its unsettling beauty, is the other. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let yourself exhale. Imagine the quiet of the house fading behind you, the servants returning to their whispers, the dolls resuming their silent watch, the library absorbing the secrets you glimpsed. The fog lifts slowly, the air becomes lighter, and your heartbeat slows. You carry the echoes of a world that demanded respect, observation, and humility, and perhaps a bit of courage you didn't know you had. You settle somewhere safe, letting the tension drift away like the fog, breathing in the calm and letting out a gentle sigh. The house has left its mark, yes, but it also leaves behind a quiet sense of awe, the weight of history, the persistence of human lives intertwined with walls, furniture, and shadow. You close your eyes, feeling that the house, the city, and its stories will remain with you, softly, subtly, like a lullaby of memory. The night is over, the house silent once more, and you have survived, if only just. Let yourself sink slowly, the events of the night settling like dust on the floorboards. The candlelight flickers one final time in your mind, gentle and soft, and you feel the house's presence recede into quiet memory. Each room, the nursery, the dining hall, the attic, the library, breathes only in recollection now, no longer pressing against your skin or whispering in your ears. You are safe, enveloped by the calm of morning, where shadows are gentler, sounds more distant, and every detail you encountered drifts into soft abstraction. Breathe in slowly, imagining the fog outside the windows lifting, the smog of London dispersing, sunlight touching cobblestones and rooftops. The dolls no longer glare, the music box rests quietly, the rocking horse stands still. The empty chairs at dinner are merely furniture again, the echoes of whispered servants' conversations fading like a gentle song. You can release the tension from your chest and shoulders, letting the weight of the house slip into the realm of memory, where it is safe and untouchable. The wind hums softly outside, a distant fan in your imagination, carrying away unease, and you feel your heartbeat slow. The stories of the house, the secrets, the shadows, the ghosts of manners, curiosity, and careful observation linger only as gentle impressions, like the final notes of a lullaby. Each breath draws you deeper into calm, each exhale leaves a little more fear behind. Let your eyelids grow heavy, your body sinking comfortably into whatever surface holds you. The Victorian house exists now only as a quiet story in your mind, its lessons absorbed but no longer threatening. Your mind drifts, a soft current carrying you towards sleep. The fog is gone, the shadows are still, and you rest knowing that you have traversed a world both unsettling and beautiful, and now it rests within you softly as you drift into your own dreams.